Hello and welcome. Well, now that we're slowly ascending out of lockdown and possibly starting to look at life with a fresh or renewed perspective, have you thought to yourself, I'm not sure I want to go back to the hectic, busy, and stressful life I was living before we entered into the stay at home era? I mean, why were we ever pushing ourselves to the extreme before anyway? Think about it. We live in a first world country. We have a roof over our heads. We have enough food, clothing, warmth, and all the things that we need to survive, and then some. Millions of people around the world would do anything to have these luxuries. So the question is, when is enough enough? And at what cost are we willing to sacrifice our physical, mental, and spiritual health moving forward as we emerge out of lockdown? To talk with us about this today, we welcome back Krissy Regan. Now, Krissy is founder of Mindful Mums Queensland and author of the new book, Broken to Unbreakable, 12 Steps and Unbreakable Mind, Body and Spirit. Welcome back, Krissy. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me again. It's lovely to see your face. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, and I'm really excited to talk about this. It's definitely a lot I personally want to be able to learn, and I'm sure everyone watching and listening as well. And I guess if this whole COVID-19 era has taught us anything, I guess it's the beauty and serenity in just slowing down. And it's something that many of us may have really been needed to be forced to do, I guess, to experience what it's like to live in just a peaceful and calm state. So, I'd love to know initially, why do you think we allowed life just to get so busy? I guess, is it just a byproduct of, the rising cost of living, or is it just that we've always wanted more and allowing, I guess, consumerism to get the better of us, or is it something else? What are your thoughts?
Oh, my thoughts are it's a lot of that stuff. Serenity is my favorite word this year. I adopted it as my word for 2020. In
Nice.
September, in September 19, I wrote down in my book, goal emotion for 2020 is serenity. So I do reflect on that, and it has been, there is time of serenity at the moment, particularly in nature. And, when we spend time in nature, we also absorb that serenity. So it's important. But it's true, we do get consumed in consumerism. We do get consumed in needing to achieve and to accumulating stuff. And, often we build, trying to build resources here, but we're actually depleting resources from over there. And it's that balance between the two, because even when you're trying to achieve professionally or personally, some parts of you become depleted. So there's very much a balance to be achieved, and it's helping people to become aware of the mindset that allows them to achieve versus also repair. So it's a balance between the two.
Yeah. And I think that word balance is something that is very, very powerful. I have it on my vision board actually as well. And it's right in the middle of it. It says balance, because I think that's something that so many of us really struggle with. But I guess the question is, now, how can we overcome, I guess, like the way that life was before? I guess we all have
Mm.
bills to pay. We've all got expenses. So what's the key here, do you think? Is it balance, do you think?
It is balance, and I'm a Libran, so I should be balanced.
Oh,
But
there you go.
I've spent most of my life either being very up or very down. And I'm striving now to understand what balance is for me, because balance is different for all of us.
True.
And you don't need to be a Libran to want to attain balance in your life. As working parents, balance is incredibly difficult to achieve
Yes.
because you have managed many different expectations. I think the reality for me is, since I'm very clear about what fulfills me and what is important for me, then I can start to make some more educated and informed choices about the things that best serve me. So, if the drive is to accumulate more wealth or to accumulate more possessions, in doing that, what am I sacrificing on this side? So, you sacrifice maybe your health or your relationships or your well-being in order to necessarily achieve those things. So for me, the balance is actually, now I understand the trade-off. I know what I would like to achieve, and that is more balance and harmony, and that serenity. And in knowing that serenity is a goal for me, when I'm asked to do something or I commit to do something, I really understand what the trade-off is and whether it's worth it to me personally.
And I guess the thing is understanding that psychology and that point of view, because I guess by living in such a busy, fast-paced life, lifestyle, I guess we are missing out on seeing the bigger picture of life, and that is, I guess everything that incorporates what balance actually is. Do you think?
Mm. It is true. And I think early last year I was talking about something in my life, and the person I was speaking to said to me, just be mindful of the cost. And that really struck a chord with me. And I went away and reflected on that comment quite a lot. And, I've studied procurement. So this idea of cost and the idea of value were two things that are really quite intrinsic in my mindset. So I was thinking, yeah, every time I do something, there's a cost to me personally, but also to those around me. And if I don't take into account the actual costs of doing all those things, the cost of it may far outweigh the value that I'm ever going to get or achieve. So it probably took someone asking me that question in order for me to fundamentally start to apply that principle in my life, the cost versus the value versus, what's beneficial essentially.
Yeah. I think this whole COVID-19 era has really made a lot of us look at our lives and question, what it's almost like sort of doing a bit of a assessment of everything, and what am I going to keep and what am I going to sort of turf, and what's going to be
Yeah.
sort of incorporated as we move forward, I guess. But how do you think this whole COVID-19 era could change life for the better for everyone?
Well, fundamentally, there may be a shift in working practices, which are important. Uh, and also the home life balance and understanding, what that kids are okay to be at home and to be a little bit bored sometimes, and
Yep.
having our kids doing after school activities every day and us rushing around so much, and even just spending so much time in the car and so much time sedentary. I was talking to someone yesterday who's got family in the UK, and indeed, we've got family in the UK, and commuting is a huge thing in our life, and we spend so much time commuting, which is generally relatively unproductive time, but it's also very sedentary time
Yes.
generally. So and therein lies a huge health concern, that the amount of time you spend commuting is your sedentary time, is also your inactive time. So we hopefully a lot of people have had a lot less sedentary time as that we've been in COVID. So it's really about kind of embracing the things that we've adopted in terms of our health and well-being during this time, and then carrying them forward. And that is, how much do I want to be sat in the car rushing around? How much do I want to be running the kids from here to different places? And what is the overall cost of it? So, that was kind of a driving force behind the article, which has, had some big questions for me for a while.
Well, in saying that, yeah, so we published your article titled, Am I Doing Enough? So for someone who hasn't read the article yet, can you tell us a little bit about it and just, I guess, explain what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, so am I doing enough is a question probably as mums we ask ourselves every day. Am I helping enough with homework? Am I feeding my children enough healthy food? Am I getting enough exercise? These are kind of, am I doing enough questions that are kind of coming up on a daily basis for me as an individual, and no doubt for many other mums as well. So, but the reality of am I doing enough, and not realizing I've taken on too much is also a question that we probably, don't kind of analyze too often. So I've studied procurement, and the idea of cost versus value is something that is kind of quite intrinsic to me. So what is the cost of something versus the value that you derive out of it? So I was going for a run, and throughout the run, I was working this idea through my mind as to, okay, what is the cost of doing all the things that we do in life versus a perceived and real value that you get out of it? Because often the costs associated with doing things, we just think, oh, well, there's another $200 to go to X lessons, or there's another, after school activity that we must do. But the reality is that it's the preparation time, the planning time, the
Yes.
leaving work on time, the getting all the kit bags packed, on a Monday to make sure they're ready for a Friday. There's a lot of planning involved in everything that we do.
Yes.
And it's understanding that planning time, not just the physical costs of the petrol and the membership fees, but all of the other costs that come along with that are things that we probably don't recognize so much. And I don't just mean in respect of our children, I also mean in respect of ourselves.
As well. Yeah. So in the article, you mentioned the real cost of doing all the time means that we spend less time being, and it's when we're in the being mode as opposed to the doing mode that we repair, we create, we connect, and we feel the most love. So can you just explain a little bit more and expand on this for us?
Mm. COVID has it forced us to be still. And in being still, that's when our bodies repair, and that's when we have the most creative ideas. You know, you're not going to necessarily come up with the most creative idea when you're busy, 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 busy. So being and doing is a concept. So we all know what doing is physically. I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this, but also mentally we spend a lot of time doing. And I think for a lot of people, they may not fully understand the mental side of doing. So when you're in doing mode mentally, you know, you're planning, you're thinking, you're ruminating, you've got this narrative running in your head. And often we don't know to switch it off because
Yes.
it's only when we switch off the narrative in our head and the planning and the ruminating and the thinking. Of course, we need to do that, but it's not helpful all the time. When we switch off that narrative and that state of doing in our head, we allow ourselves to be in the being mode. And the being mode is, you know, where you're in the present mode, you're more inward looking, you're actually feeling and noticing your experience of the world. So that's the being mode. And you can be being mode physically and you can be being mode mentally, where you're not efforting and you're not trying to be active mentally. And when we allow ourselves that space to not be active mentally, that's when our body repairs itself and we can come up with those creative, inspirational, amazing ideas and solutions.
It's like when we allow our brains to go a little bit mushy. Like I feel like I get to the weekend and I'm like that. I push myself so much throughout the Monday to Friday, and then I have to
Mhm,
allow myself to not be in front of a screen on the weekends
mhm.
and just allow my brain just to sort of to go a little bit soft as opposed to sort of, which is that being and doing mode. I guess and
Yeah,
everyone's got a different physiological way of connecting to those two, I guess.
yeah.
Now, in the article, also you and you've got some really great sort of pictures and that sort of stuff that you incorporate into it. Can you explain to us a little bit more? And you mentioned it earlier about the price cost iceberg model, and I guess
Yeah,
how it's really relevant to parents' lives.
yeah. Well, from a procurement point of view or business point of view, a cost price iceberg is essentially the cost of the product is just the tip of the iceberg.
Hmm.
But it's all the running costs and the associated costs. It could be the insurance, it could be the maintenance, it could be the ongoing life costs that is the hidden part of the iceberg. And that's the part that you really have to plan for, because if you don't plan for all those costs, they will sink your ship essentially.
Hmm.
So if you equate that to your everyday life, you know, the cost of doing anything that we choose in our life is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
It's the actual cost of all of the things underneath it that can sink your ship. So, you know, again, it's time, it's planning, it's effort, it's our finances, it's our physical cost, the emotional and mental cost that goes along. Every time we make a choice, it affects all of those things at the bottom of the iceberg. And knowing and understanding that intrinsically takes practice. And, you know, because last year I was offered the opportunity to do something amazing, but when I actually considered all of the costs of that, the hidden costs of it, I was then able to make a more informed decision about whether or not that would serve me and what would be the ultimate value that I would derive from it. Because if the cost of it, the hidden costs as well as the exposed costs far outweigh the value, then you can really start to make a more informed choice about what you take on in your life. I hope
And
that makes sense.
yeah, so you were mentioning earlier on about the fact, I guess, as parents maybe we'll be reviewing what activities kids will be doing, what hobbies and those types of things. Is that when, I guess, we can sort of make that model relevant to parents' lives now, instead of them sort of saying, okay, great, well, they've got two children and each of those children have got two activities throughout the week, and that means A, B, C, and D, and all of that prep and everything else that goes into it. What is that cost versus, blah, blah, blah model? Is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
It is. It relates to those daily choices that we make into what we subscribe to in our life, but also, you know, can relate it to your career. So an example with the children is, you know, we may sign our kids up for after school activities or they request a desire to participate in A, B, and C. So generally, we want our kids to be happy, so we say yes right
Hmm.
away,
Hmm.
and we pay the money, and then we figure out how to make it happen. Now, it doesn't take a few times of having to make it happen that we then start to appreciate the hidden costs of that making it happen. So,
Yes.
it's the extra equipment, it's the extra snacks, it's the extra time rushing around, it's the extra time sat in your car, and it's the extra time sometimes sitting on a hard bleacher with nowhere to go and nothing to do for an hour or 45 minutes while our child does that activity. Now, of course, we want to be able to expose them to experiences which help them grow. But the reality is, we are parents, and whether, maybe the costs of that to us, if we neglect that cost, then it will come back to bite us, because we're the ones rushing around like headless chickens. We're the ones having to sort out all the stuff. We're the ones that are sat down waiting for the activity to finish. So, where is the value in that for you as well as for them?
Yeah.
And, there's the question. So the value that they will derive out of it versus the value that, we will derive out of it. And my daughter wants to do every kind of dance under the sun, but I have to, limit the amount of classes that I would potentially put her to, because I know the costs associated with doing that, the sitting around, the waiting time, the rushing to get from school to the lesson on time. And I remember driving and getting stuck in traffic and thinking, we're going to be late, we're going to be late, we're going to be late, and going into a huge stress. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, this is just a
This is
6-year-old
silly.
ballet lesson. It doesn't need to be like this. And sitting down in a crowded room while people are climbing all over you and there's food flying everywhere isn't necessarily a pleasant experience as a mum.
So,
you know,
so what are
so
your
I was
recommendations now for parents in that? So should they, how do they sort of have that moment of clarity within themselves and their own lives, as you're saying, to what they're subscribing to? What are your
yeah.
recommendations for, and the things to consider when signing up for kids' activities then?
Yeah. Well, it's not just the being at the activity. Again, it's the planning and the preparation time that it takes to get them there. And the other costs associated, with the extra afternoon teas that are needed and the extra equipment that they'll need and the shoes that they'll grow out of in 5 minutes, those are all hidden costs of things that it's real. And I don't believe we probably think that through enough when we subscribe or we make that commitment. It's that
Yeah.
hidden cost. And it's not until things come too much or the child turns around to us a few weeks into it and says, I don't want to do soccer
Yeah.
anymore.
I want to do
And
tennis
you think,
now.
yeah, well, you've paid for the term, so you're going for the term. So then it becomes a punishment. They have to go because you've paid for the term. So there becomes a balance as to teaching them kind of commitment and resilience versus forcing them to do something because you
Yeah.
don't want to waste the money and you don't want to be judged for not turning up, and therein lies another cost, that cost of judgment and that cost of feeling as though you've now wasted that money. And those are things which are pretty important. So my advice at the moment is, before you get back to all the activities that you're doing, is just really to understand, okay, what are the costs to me in terms of my time, in terms of planning, preparation, running around, sitting down sedentary for an hour whilst they're doing that, and sometimes it's much longer. And what value is there for me as well as for them? Because if you start to see some value for yourself as well as for your child, then it becomes a much more meaningful experience for both of you.
And I guess what to do, I guess, when parents realize they've taken on too much, like what do they do
Yeah.
then when they're already in that, they've already committed and they're
Yeah.
like, okay, so they've already committed and they're listening to this now or watching this now and they're like, all right, what do I do?
Well, there's a line in my book actually, which sounds quite harsh, but it's meant with love, which is, we're quite stubborn and we would rather choke on something than spit it out and confess that we've bitten off more than we can chew.
Yep.
And it is true, isn't it? Because you bite off more than you chew and you're kind of like, you're trying not to kind of give up because we're stubborn. But actually, the reality is now we have like all of this time on our hands where we can really be more selective and choosy and to be stubborn and to think about, okay, the bigger picture and what is the impact and what it will derive it, and just take that bit more time. We don't need to go into term 3 with a full schedule of activities. We don't need to do that.
No.
So let's decide what are the things that bring you most joy, your children most joy, the family most joy, that still allows you to have time together, to grow and to experience, but we aren't all rushing around like manic headless chickens all the time.
What about, I guess, the consideration for parents who give up their own hobbies as well, um,
Mm,
to be able to ensure that
yes.
their kids have, and yeah. So tell us about, I guess, your point of
Let,
view on that.
let me ask you a question. What's a hobby?
Something that you love doing and it gives you energy, and put some
And
light into
do you
you.
have some, Rachel?
Do I do I have any hobbies? No, I work pretty much 7 days, so
Yeah. So that was me a year ago. Do you know? And I realized I didn't have any hobbies. I didn't do anything for fun for me. So
yeah,
where are my hobbies? What the heck am I doing? So how can I encourage my children to be active and to have hobbies and to have this amazing social circle if I don't have any of that for myself?
yeah.
So I decided to reclaim my hobbies. Now, I didn't even know actually what my hobbies were. I'd forgotten what they
Yes,
were.
connect into that sense of self. Like, what do I actually enjoy doing? Yeah,
Yeah. So I just gave myself permission to rediscover some hobbies. One of my hobbies is cooking. I absolutely love cooking. But going to the markets, buying my food off the market traders, and then coming home and having all this stuff in front of me fresh and deciding what I'm going to cook, that's a good hobby. That's a
mm,
healthy hobby. And also
beautiful.
healthy hobbies. The second hobby was running. So I hadn't run in 20 years. I was overweight and in a lot of agony in my body. So why would I want to run? Well, because it's healthy and you used to be quite good at it. So maybe if you actually tried, you might enjoy it again. So, I allowed myself to explore that again. And writing, I love writing. And I had stopped doing that. I had written for other people, for businesses, and for all of my work, but I hadn't done it for myself. And there's my favorite quote is, squandering your gifts brings you distress. And
Beautiful.
I had forgotten my gifts, and my gifts were also my hobbies, and I wanted to use them to nourish myself, but also then to share them with others. So that's kind of important.
And I'd love to touch on the subject of mindset. Do you have any simple tips, I guess, we can apply to help shift our mindset and shift our like perspective and lens that we sort of see life at all as well?
Yeah, I think we chatted a little bit before we came on camera about the self-sabotage angle of things. And, we can
Yep.
sabotage our relationships and on a relational level when we're always doing, doing, doing. We sabotage our relationships with our children if we're not present with them. We sabotage a relationship with our parents or our partners if we're not doing the quality thing or speaking their love language, which is a whole nother article. But equally, we also then sabotage ourselves because we don't allow ourselves permission to try, permission to fail, or permission to seek what fills us up. And I don't necessarily like to use the analogy of filling the cup because I think it's talked about too much, but actually
Yes.
filling yourself up is that fulfillment. And on Saturday morning, I had both my girls on my bed and I was sitting on my laptop sending an ebook to Montreal in Canada. And I felt 150% fulfilled because I had the two people I love more than anything in the world on my bed. And I was in bed writing and sharing my book. And I've realized at that moment, I feel 100% fulfilled. And, I wouldn't have been able to say that 18 months ago.
Yes. So you've sort of worked through that and understood what was the balance and what you needed to like if we have a plate of life, what is a combination of what you have on that plate, so it's not, I guess, out of balance and you don't have too much of one thing, or it's sort of a little bit too sort of overcrowded,
Yeah.
I guess. Do you think?
And what's holding you back? I knew what was holding me back. And once I let go of the stuff that was holding me back, um, I reached that point in my life where, letting go of my own fear and my own judgment was holding me back. But also if I'm in judgment of others, then the judgment that I see in them is reflected back to myself. So I don't
Mm,
want to judge other people because then all I'm doing is bringing judgment to myself. And I want to be free of judgment in order to create and do. And like, we even said, we're our own harshest critic. So there's nothing that someone that can't say to me that I wouldn't have already said to myself. And I know that intrinsically because I'm harsh on myself. I'm hard on myself. I want to aspire to have high standards. So then equally, why should I live in fear of judgment when all I'm doing is I'm harming myself and blocking my potential, which is what I
So,
didn't want to do.
how did you apply, I guess, this doing plus versus being model? How did you apply that model to help your health and your well-being and the quality of your life then? What did you do? How did you then sort of, and how should somebody then go, okay, this is a great concept. How do I then make this shift?
Yeah. So I think I'll just touch briefly on kind of the doing and the being again, because like there's the physical side of doing, but there's also the mental side of doing. And in doing and being we are receptive to what comes. In doing, we are trying to effort what comes. Do you know what I mean? And there's a very subtle difference. But if you're mindful of the subtle difference between the being, which is the accepting, then when things happen to you, you can accept them a little bit more freely. You don't try and judge them or get fed up or frustrated, because ultimately the universe wants you to succeed. And when you accept that as a mindset, when things come to you, whether they're challenges or learning experiences or stumbling blocks or anything, you accept them as part of your journey and your opportunity to grow and to learn. And I've had a challenge in my life at the moment, which has been causing me some angst and frustration, but I keep looking for the angle in which to see how am I growing and learning from this. So every day, if it challenges me, I think, okay, what am I going to learn today? How am I going to overcome this? What are my resilient skills that I can use? So you can just draw more internally, and being allows you to go internally and bring up those intrinsic skills that help you overcome challenges more easily.
Yeah, there's a one paragraph I'd like to read from the article as well. I think that explains all of this beautifully as well. As lockdown comes, this is your words,
Thank
as
you.
lockdown comes to an end in some parts of the world, we have an opportunity to review and reset our commitments and redefine our doing. You may have spent more time being lately, and that is a great thing for your soul. Continuing in this state of being throughout your life will enable you to be more objective about what serves you and what benefits you, as well as I guess your family members have as a cost of the real cost of being associated with doing. So that's everything that you've been speaking about, is just really assessing what is the cost of one versus the other. So,
Mm.
I mean, in that respect, I guess if you were to summarize, I guess, your key points that we've spoken about today, how would you sort of summarize, if someone's wanting to make a shift into their life now, as we are sort of emerging out of lockdown, what should we do? Where do we start?
Mm. I think as a mum, for me, the biggest lesson that I have learned is that when I'm making decisions on behalf of the children or the family, really recognizing what are the hidden costs associated with those decisions, and being comfortable with the amount of effort that's going to be involved in committing to things, and just knowing that as I recommit to doing, I'm going to be giving up my being time, and I'm going to be, because when you put energy there, you probably take energy from here. So where do you want that balance of energies to be? And give yourself that kind of family time and that permission to kind of learn and think and grow and create. You can't necessarily do that when you're in a doing state all the time. So, that's really my message, is to kind of think about the hidden costs, not just for your children, but for yourself, because ultimately you're the person who will be making the sacrifices.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this concept with us today. If parents have got any other questions and want to reach out to you, and of course, if they want to purchase a copy of your book, whereabouts can they find you?
So they can find my book on thewellnesspoet.com. Paperback copies will be available in the next 3 weeks. The audiobook is live now, winging its way around the world. Um, and and they can email me, mindfulmumsqld@gmail.com, and I would be very happy also to connect on Instagram or Facebook. So thank you so much for having me again. It's
Thank you.
brilliant to talk to you.
Thank you for your time, Krissy, and really look forward to the next one. Take care.
Thank
All
you.
the best.
Bye.
Bye.